John, thanks so much for joining us here today. Really excited to have you, learn from your insights, and thanks for the service that you're doing for the community. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Appreciate the time for sure.
Absolutely. So big thing on everybody's mind right now is how are we going to make it through the next couple of weeks with all the changes that are going on because of COVID-19? What do you see as some of the biggest obstacles that we as I'll say the workforce of a month ago versus the workforce of today versus the workforce of 4 weeks from now? What are some of those big obstacles that you see during this period of transition?
I think one of the biggest issues you're going to run into is the idea or mindset that things can't be done certain ways. Mm-hmm. In other words, there are a component of individuals in my organization. 90% of our workforce is in the field in construction. Okay. We're in a situation where our work is considered essential because we are keeping lights on, we're keeping the phone lines going, those kind of things everybody needs, regardless of what's going on around us. We 100% want to keep that infrastructure going. But I think there are certainly a contingent of people that are having to learn how to deal with work from home where it is available and effective. And I think that goes back to, do I trust my employees? Have I made sure that I've put them in the best situations possible to be successful, to do the work? And while there's and also on the flip side, the employees have to trust that my organization is being forthright with me. They're telling me what's going on, because again, right now something may be essential. 3 weeks from now, maybe it's not, or maybe the work dries up and there's not availability to do it. We need to be having those conversations, because if you're not having them, they're going to make them up in their own head. Which is going to be the worse than what reality is. It always is.
9
times out of 10, absolutely. So I think it's where we were in the past. We're certainly not there. Do I think it will change going forward? Yes. I think as people get more comfortable, as people learn how to use tools like what we're doing right now when it comes to streaming and what have you, there's always going to be a contingent that's got to work, be it construction or be it, in food service or in hospitals and those kind of things. It's working with that. And I think it's also trying to figure out how to show some compassion and grace in this time. Yeah. Everybody's digesting this differently. Mm-hmm. And everybody is handling things differently, geographically and just personally. If you're single as opposed to having a family, or maybe you have older parents, or maybe you have lost someone to COVID-19 already. We're all in different places and digesting it differently. And I think we have to be able to understand that because people digest and absorb and think things differently than we do, we have to show a little more grace in this time and try to work with them as best we can.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what's interesting too is I think about how typically we've been able to physically interact with people. So we kind of get a sense of what's going on. But now we really have no idea, And so this idea of how do we make sure that we're keeping track and empathizing with our folks that we don't get to see every day anymore.
Right.
I'd be really curious to hear. So, a lot of the attention has been focused on this idea of a remote workforce. But your workforce right now is really, it's not remote. I mean, like you said, you're an essential service, the construction work that you guys are doing. How has COVID-19 affected the folks that still get to go to work in the traditional sense? I mean, how do you social distance on a construction site? So I'm sure there's some anxiety there. How do you navigate the stress of, you're working with your coworker over here, but you're physically interacting, but you shouldn't be physically interacting, but you have to, how does that balance play out?
Well, that is one of those things where, just like in HR, none of us had a playbook for these things. Right. We are building the playbook as we go. I am in a unique situation, I believe, compared to many other HR professionals that may work in my business. My son actually works for our company in construction. Okay. He is in the field and does this work. So I'm in a different place, because here's my 19-year-old who is living it every day. We have put a lot of provisions in place when it comes to how to handle equipment and being cognizant of space. And again, we have people that are out, overseeing and saying, hey, we can't all congregate here. We've got to do things remotely. we can't do interviews in person. We've got to utilize video, or when somebody's onboarding, I got to remember if they're coming in to get paperwork, can I get paperwork to them earlier, get them to fill it out, bring it with them, and one less point of contact along the way. It's one of those things, and it's, I create content from a podcast perspective for Team Official. I'm actually creating podcasts that we can share with teammates about some of these things, when it comes to safety changes, or even our teammates that are from the office side, maybe they can pull to learn more about what's going on and what we're doing to ensure the safety of everyone, which it's in our company, that's the number one thing. Safety is absolutely critical, and it's just got this incredible bent on it now with COVID-19 over us.
Yeah, I can't imagine that safety. I mean, safety, I'm sure, has always been one of the top things for your company, and now you're just adding a huge another layer on top of that, right?
Yes.
That is extremely difficult. So, are there ways or resources that you mentioned your podcast? Is this an opportunity to help kind of with the mental and emotional stress of, I think I would assume operating machinery can be a little bit stressful in and of itself, and now you're saying,
right,
hey, here are these other things to it. How is that mental and emotional well-being, taking care of that? How has that changed in the last year?
I think I'm seeing a lot more folks from the field, the leadership team, reaching out in different ways, checking on, just asking. We don't think a lot about, hey, how you doing? Maybe you just ask, and you're not necessarily focused. And we're all guilty of that, right? It's certain.
Yeah.
But it is. I think it's being more intentional when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
And those that are working from home, what's the most effective way to stay in touch? And is it once a day? Is it twice a day? Is it text? Is it video? Whatever it is, figuring out what works best with that teammate and how am I communicating with them, and personalizing the experience to some extent. I think that's another thing you're going to see out of this, is that maybe, well, I shouldn't say maybe, I'm hoping that leaders will learn more about the individuals and how do I personalize that message to that individual and make it more impactful.
And you mentioned that this is you're writing the playbook as you go along. It's every day is a day of discovery, trying to figure out how to best cope with these situations. Do you feel, is this truly this situation has never happened before, we are totally in an unknown space, or do we have maybe some experiences? I think of the 07, 08, right, with the recession. Mm-hmm. A lot of folks looking back to that as a benchmark for difficult economic times. Is that at all? Do you feel like that's at all applicable, or this is a whole different animal that we're dealing with today?
Well, for me, it's a different animal. Back in the time of the recession, I was working for another company that was also in the utility construction space, and it was not necessarily as affected as the more white collar jobs.
Right. Yeah, right.
Where I think we saw more of that. We were continuing to hire in that space then. I think in this case, you've got this unseen thing, right? We can't see COVID-19. We don't know. Right. We don't know when it's going to go away. There's a lot more. I think there's a lot more uncertainty and fear. And again, we're all afraid at some level. Right. There is a lot of unknown for us. I can't comfortably say I can look back 10 years ago and say, what did I use then? In my 20 years doing human resources work, I'm not really ever aware at the scale. In other words, particularly talking to other HR professionals, many of which are working for smaller companies that with all the legislation that's come to pass is directly impacting them. Right. It is all brand new work.
And part of me feels like that's almost a point of comfort for those of us out there that are struggling, because it's like, we're all struggling. I feel like the large portion of this burden has fallen on HR to help navigate, right? You think about these scenarios, like who in the company is going to take care of it? HR, right? And a lot of HR departments are on fire right now, and that is not a reflection on them. You know what I mean? That's just guys, we're all in this together. This is a new thing. If you could sit down with an HR professional right now that's really struggling with their industry, maybe layoffs, furloughs, all these sorts of things that are happening in other places, what would you tell them to help get them through this next, who knows, period of time?
It's interesting you asked that question. I host a Twitter chat and I host a podcast, the HR Social Hour, where we talk about a lot of these things. And in our last two chats have directly been about COVID-19 and dealing with emergency situations. And what I'm finding is that there are a lot of departments of one and very small HR shops where a lot of these folks have come to social looking for help, not just the legalese piece or the HR or the technical help, but just a life raft. Hey,
Right.
I'm really, really
Right.
struggling. And I appreciate that people are willing to be so raw and asking for that help. I feel like we've really tried to help people with that, to say, we're here for you. We, offering up resources, be it the legalese or the technical piece, as much as, hey, if you just need somebody to call, you need somebody to talk to, you need a shoulder to cry on, that's why we're here. And I'm hoping, again, hope is out there that
Right.
some of the folks, that many of these folks that have looked for community in this time will stay part of the community, and not just as these things subside. It will come to pass. We know that at some point things will shift, and we'll see things getting better. I'm very hopeful that those folks that were looking then will remember, hey, let me stay connected, because what we found, particularly with the community that we've built online through the HR Social Hour, is that I can go to those people anytime I need them. And it's not just when things are challenging or I'm really struggling. It's, can I talk to somebody else when maybe they're struggling, or maybe there's a success that we want to celebrate together?
Which in this time, we definitely should be celebrating all the successes that we can find.
Absolutely.
I think that sense of community, I think you're right on. That sense of community, it's there and it's available. And the saddest thing to me in a time like this is seeing folks struggle trying to do it alone, right? Because there's no need. It's already hard enough as it is. Let's all be in it together as a community. And I love the work that you're doing, trying to pull together those resources with your podcast and helping in your Twitter chat, helping make sure everyone is connected. And I think if we can look to the future a little bit and think about, all right, are there going to be some positive impacts of COVID-19? Certainly the benefits aren't going to outweigh the costs, but
right.
If we look at, hey, what is going to be something that we can take away from this? I'm hoping, my hope is that it's that strengthened sense of community, that, hey, we all came together in this time of need. Let's stay together. There's no reason to split back out and do our own thing again, but rather let's stay a part of this community and look at all the great work that we can continue to do. John, anything else that you'd like to add today for those that might be looking for resources? You mentioned your podcast. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the podcast and your Twitter chat so that folks can know about it and have access to it.
So the HR Social Hour Half Hour Podcast is available at hrsocialhourpodcast.podbean.com or any of the major platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, we're going to be there. My host, Wendy Daly, and I talk to practitioners, analysts, vendors, people around the HR space that we think are cool, that we've gotten to know. And we really talk about three things. The kind of the tenets of the podcast are about being connected, just like we are looking for people are looking for right now, giving back to your community, be it that the HR community or your community at large, and ultimately the power of your network. And those are the three really important things there. The podcast comes out every Thursday morning with a new episode. The episode that just came out yesterday is actually, we revisited with three folks that have been on the show over the last couple of years, and it became a COVID-19 conversation, but not about so much the legalese or the technical stuff, but really how are we dealing with it as individuals and as HR practitioners, knowing that people, like you said earlier, everybody's looking to us. The Twitter chat is the second and fourth Sundays of each month on Twitter at 7:00 Eastern time, PM. And again, it's an hour-long conversation where we'll ask 6 questions. The first one is always, what's in your glass? It's Sunday night. We want people to really, enjoy that time and enjoy that community.
Right.
You'll have people from as many as 5 or 6 different countries taking part.
Wow.
And it's just an amazing way to connect. And we try to keep it light. The last couple have been a little more serious, but there are a lot of great Twitter chats out there. And we always consider ours the entry point. If you've never done a Twitter chat at all, come hang out with us. We treat everybody really well, and then and give you some comfort to go do others. There are, again, a lot of great resources. I'm a huge fan of Twitter. Okay. It is my favorite place for HR people because I think the community overall is so incredibly accommodating and welcoming. And if you put yourself out there, say, hey, I'm in HR, hashtag HR, people are going to find you, and we connect and try to stay connected as best we can.
I love it. Thank you, John, for all that great work you're doing. Thanks for joining us here today. We're going to be posting this out and making sure we direct people to your podcast. Thanks again for your advice and sharing your knowledge. And we look to chat again soon.
All right, everybody stay safe. Thanks.